Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I am here to talk about how an improvement could be made for Louisiana's high school education. Before taking a college course on the Reconstruction period, I never would have known about events such as the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. This was a massacre led by white supremacists against the black community in Wilmington, North Carolina, where the black community there once thrived in every sense of the word. However, with with the rise of their success followed a rise of jealousy and hatred from white supremacists, from using threats and voter intimidation to inciting a violent mob against the black community. A group of armed white supremacists had the first ever successful coup in the United States. They murdered countless black people. White and black people alike were run out of town, and it seems like Wilmington never recovered after this event. And it also seems like very few people have even heard of this event, especially people my age in their early 20s. So, why is that? Well, after taking this class, it has made me realize that our Southern education tends to shy away from the ugly parts of American history, especially formative educations, like high schools. Difficult topics where white people have failed communities outside of their own are hardly taught in a manner where it is impactful for our students to understand. White supremacy, slavery, even discussions had about the general experiences black people went through and still go through is because of our country's history and how it isn't being taught in an impactful manner, especially not in our schools. To most students in high school, especially to me, history is just another subject for them to memorize temporarily, only to forget about when the next big assignment is due. Louisiana alone has one of the lowest rates in education. According to the state's Department of Education, concerning our rank placement alone, we have improved to the 41st place in 2023 out of the 50 states from the 49th place. This is a fundamental flaw in our education system. There are, of course, many factors that go into the rank of our education system, and I understand that. However, I do believe a big part of that problem is that students do not have the incentive to learn, especially if these students aren't taught in an engaging way. That is why today I would like to discuss one way that may help improve engagement in the classroom by introducing a newer, more diverse required reading list. And I believe that Charles Chestnut's novel, The Marrow of Tradition, would be an excellent novel to have on that new list. Firstly, The Marrow of Tradition is a fiction novel. Reading literary fiction is a great way for students to connect with characters, especially in a novel where there is an incredibly diverse cast. This work contains characters of different races in various positions in society, painting a much more realistic vision of what the 1890s were truly like, especially after the ruling of Plessy v. Ferguson. Second, this book is also written by a mixed African American man, which would help diversify the required reading quota. Many teachers and students alike have complained for years about how there are very few Black authors in the curriculum. Reading books, like reading books by Black authors, especially by those who are retelling historical events, have especially historical events done to their communities, gives readers a perspective of the events that would otherwise have been neglected or forgotten about. Also, most importantly, this book has many teaching opportunities for English and history teachers alike. So, what is Chestnut's novel about? Chestnut's novel is a fictional retelling of the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. It is set in a fictional town known as Wellington, where the story itself follows a series of subplots surrounding several socially and racially diverse characters. There are three main families whose lives cross paths multiple times throughout the story: the Carterets, the Delameres, and the Millers. However, the main 2 points of the story are centered around the murder of Polly Alcatray, an old, rich white woman who is related to the Carterets, and a conspiracy between three white men in power plotting to reinstate white supremacy by preventing black people of Wellington from voting in the upcoming election. The tone of this book is set at the beginning of the novel between the Carterets and the Millers. Baby Dodie Carteret has something small lodged in his throat and requires a team of surgical doctors. Dr. Miller, a highly respected African American doctor who studied in Europe and returned to his hometown to open up a hospital, was invited to assist the surgery by a white colleague. However, the head of the White household, Major Carteret, and their family doctor, Dr. Price, both wished to refuse Dr. Miller due to the color of his skin. After a very heated debate between the major and the doctors, the operation begins without the attendance of Dr. Miller. When he does arrive a few minutes late, the family doctor, Dr. Price, has this internal debate with himself on what to say to him on page 75. His, Dr. Price, claim of superiority to the colored doctor rested fundamentally upon the fact that he was white and Miller was not. And yet, this superiority for which he could claim no credit, since he had not made himself, was the very breath of his nostrils. He would not have changed places with the other for wealth untold, and as a gentleman, he would not care to have another gentleman, even a colored man, catch him in a lie. Dr. Price here is saying that he understands that his prejudice is baseless. However, to him, it is still a principle that has been ingrained in him that he wishes to uphold. Then he says, a few lines down, a word to the other surgeons would ensure their corroboration of whatever he might tell Miller. No one of them would willingly wound Dr. Miller or embarrass Dr. Price. Indeed, they need not know that Miller had come in time for the operation. His decision ends with him being dishonest about the state of the operation. This entire page alone could open up discussion in a classroom about the inherent racism prevalent. A black man, renowned in his field and clearly a very capable surgeon, turned away from a time sensitive surgery where a white baby could lose its life. Not even the fact that the person on the table was a baby who could Not even the fact that the person on the table was a baby could sway or push away the racism ingrained in Dr. Price. This sort of scene would open doors to conversation in the classroom about a variety of topics, such as the unjust and unfair treatment of Dr. Miller. They truly did rob him of that experience, and a lot of people would not agree with that. So it is best to have a conversation in the classroom about why it is wrong, why it was unjust, and then open the floor to students to have their own internal debates. This novel does have plenty of other scenes that could incite conversation and education as well. Another example being made from the character Tom Delamere. Tom Delamere is the sole heir to his family's fortune and to the name. He is also an avid alcoholic and a gambler and a racist white man. Tom Delamere impersonates his family's servant Sandy, participating in blackface several times, often for either entertainment or other nefarious purposes. The first ever instance of him doing blackface appears in chapter 13, titled The Cakewalk, where it states on page 118 that Delamere was struck with a brilliant idea. The more he considered it, the brighter it seemed. Tom Delamere then impersonates Sandy by dressing in his best clothes, and the most recognizable to Sandy, to put on a show for northern visitors who have come down to the south and catch the sights, essentially. A few lines later, it says, "The cakewalk was a great success. The most brilliant performer was a later arrival who made his appearance just as the performance was about to commence. The cake was awarded to this couple by a unanimous vote. The man presented it to his partner in a grand flourish and returned thanks in speech, which sent the northern visitors into spasms of delight at the quaintness of the blank dialect and the blank wit." Once more, this novel has another scene which could open up discussion in the classroom, because not only does Tom Delamere get away with this act, but Sandy also actually gets blamed for it and shunned by his religious community. He is thoroughly embarrassed, and he has no way of proving himself innocent. Also, most importantly, there is a scene that happens at the end of the book between the character Olivia Carteret and her mixed half sister, Janet Miller. Janet has longed for her half sister to acknowledge her existence for a very long time. She just wanted her sister to show her a bit of kindness. However, the moment she longed for has been muddied with violence and hatred. And on page 327, it says that Janet's eyes slowly filled with tears, bitter tears, burning tears. For a moment, even her grief at her child's loss dropped to second place in her thoughts. This, then, was the recognition for which, all her life, she had longed in secret. It had come after many days, and in larger measure than she had dreamed of, but it had come with the frank kindliness and sisterly love. It had not come with the frank kindliness and sisterly love, but in a storm of blood and tears, not freely given from an open heart, but extorted from a reluctance conscious by the agony of a mother's fears. This scene in particular struck me because Olivia Carteret has been seen throughout the novel looking down upon her sister and her race. And scenes like this, there are so many more scenes like this throughout the novel. Even if a class were not to teach the entire novel, which I do believe is entirely possible, but it is a very long novel, so if a class were not to teach this novel due to its length or otherwise, there are countless moments that would incite critical thinking and discussion between students and teachers alike. Chestnut also provides a brilliant commentary on the Wilmington Massacre in his novel, which would open discussion in history classes covering this event, hopefully in the future. And he does an excellent job at writing realism, which would open the doors for more realism authors to be presented in our classrooms in English. He is known for pointing out the racial injustice that he has experienced and that other people have experienced. This work came out in 1901, just several years he after the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. And he is not afraid to shy away from these difficult topics. So I am sure his novel would both inspire and educate students, which is why I believe that he should be added to the required reading list of high schools across the country, especially across the South. Having a newer, more diverse required reading list for Southern students would only benefit our education system. And according to Mike Callan, who wrote a beautiful commentary piece about literary fiction itself, he states that the most important and powerful lessons about citizenship haven't occurred in his history classes, but they have happened in his English classes during discussions about literature and imagining life through the eyes of characters who help students understand people whose experiences differ from their own. Thank you so much for listening to my video, and I hope you will have a great day.